Quelle che fai tu o facci?
Ogni sua disobbedienza aveva sbocchi che per la meraviglia toglievano il fiato.
Sono proprio contenta di vederti, Leno. Anche io.
That's fantastic.
That's not bad. That doesn't always happen. Oh, why, thank you all for coming out. We really appreciate you being here with us tonight. I want to say hi to everybody watching us on video, live streaming on Facebook. If you've got questions for us on Facebook, write them in the comments. We'll answer a few. Otherwise, we won't have a question and answer session tonight. We've just got 30 minutes to talk about as much as we possibly can.
There's the countdown timer.
It's scary, right?
Yes.
Look, you should be
not with an
fusing
audience
that
like this. No. I feel good, man.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Can't stop me now, right? No. You were just telling me backstage that you wished you'd performed that song, that they hadn't.
That was,
used it in the
you know,
credits.
the Don't Stop Me Now was, I think, the first thing I'd seen Freddie do that just blew me away. And as soon as I got this role, I asked for a few things. I asked to get a set of teeth made and a dialect coach, and then I went out to a vintage store and I bought that hat and the whole leather look. I did. And I tried it out. I had to. Mm-hmm. And yeah, there was something that I really wanted in the film. So, yeah. You know, we found a way to put it in, and I think it's such a nice way to end it.
You said you performed it in front of your twin brother. What was his reaction?
Oh man, this was between us. He's probably my biggest critic. And, I came downstairs in the living room, and unbeknownst to him, I just put the music on and I let it rip. And it put a little smile on his face, and I said, all right, if I can get that stoic bastard to appreciate it, I'm doing all right.
Well, I'm going to use all of our material from backstage right now because...
Oh, man, that was in confidence.
I know. Abusing it entirely.
Go for it.
But I am really interested that producers and casting agents watched your performance in Mr. Robot, your incredible performance in Mr. Robot.
Thank you.
Which couldn't be any more different than Freddie Mercury, and somehow saw something, saw enough to get you in the door. What did you? I mean, obviously you do an amazing job. But what do you think it was about Mr. Robot that caught their eye?
God, I don't even know if I can answer on their behalf, but I think they wanted to see. We spent 6 hours together. They flew me out from New York while I was shooting Mr. Robot, and we sat down. And I think they realized, oh, he's not, prone to as much anxiety as Elliot. And, he's a little bit more gregarious than we expected. So they realized, okay, he's acting in that role. Perhaps he can do some more acting for us. And,
do you feel like you have to overcompensate a little bit? That people are going to assume you're strange in the way that he is?
I wouldn't call him strange. I don't know if I didn't have to overcompensate because he's just so on one end of this spectrum, right. So to speak. And I just went out there and tried to be the guy, hopefully I'm being right now, who smiles a little bit and
doesn't always wear a hoodie.
Doesn't always wear a hoodie. It's so funny to go from wearing for 4 years one outfit to about 100 in this. I found that I was so amused by all of that. Yeah, I don't know I think they just wanted to make sure I was not Elliot in Mr. Robot, and then from there we went on. We just talked and talked and talked, and I could never really believe that I had the role because you never know how it's going to be in Hollywood. They told me I was the guy, and then about a month later, I got a call, a couple weeks later during Mr. Robot, and they said, listen, we love you, but we still don't have a studio to finance this, so we got to put something on tape. And I was heavy into shooting season 2 of Mr. Robot, but I found some time. I watched a Freddie Mercury interview profusely, and then I said, okay, let me give it a shot.
So what was that tape like?
I guess it was pretty good.
Well, what? Did you recreate an interview? You said you watched it.
Yeah, I recreated.
I believe it.
I recreated an interview. It's one where he says, "Oh, I'm just a musical prostitute, my dear," and he's smoking in it, and he's drinking in it, and I went through probably a pack of cigarettes. I did tell them, it took me an hour, but it did take a little bit more than an hour. But somehow, they sent that to Brian May and Roger Taylor and to studio after studio, and some thought it was a little bit too eccentric, too flamboyant, but finally Fox pulled the trigger, so thank you, Fox. And then I had to go actually one step further and went to Abbey Road and put 4 songs on tape for the band, for the members. Roger Taylor, Brian May, and Miami Beach was a pivotal part of all of this. And that was pretty daunting to get that done, singing, and they filmed me to see if my physicality was right. And I spent time working with a movement teacher and a singing coach, and then by the end of it, Anthony McCartan, who wrote the screenplay, was on the other side behind the window, and he pushes a button. He says, "Freddie, can you tell us about your upbringing? Tell us about how you grew up." And instantly I just went, it was an upheaval of an upbringing, actually. And then the question after question, and they said, "Freddie, tell us, who's your best friend in the world?" And I answered that. And the next day, we put this tape together with all the 4 songs in this interview, sent it off to Bryan and Roger. I went to Roger's house to go meet them, and Freddie's got an 1.5 inches on me. I put my boots on. I put a little swagger in my step. I walked in there, and knowing they had seen the tape, I tried to gauge them immediately, and I couldn't read them to save my life. I looked at Beach, and Beach was just stoic, nothing, unreadable. And they said, "Hey, about 20 minutes in, how about we watch your tape?" And I said, "What?" "Well, we weren't able to download it, so let's just watch it together."
Oh, no.
Yeah. So I'm standing between the 2 of them watching, and Roger's unreadable. Bryan at some point looks at me and kind of starts nodding, and I'm like, oh, thank God. My knees are starting to tremble a little bit less, and then comes the interview.
And is this your voice on the tape? Like you're singing?
Some of it was mine, and a lot of it was
performing
Freddie.
along. Right. Yeah.
They just wanted to see if it would sync, right?
Yeah.
Because it was like called a proof of concept.
Right.
But the thing that I was worried about most was the interview, because I wanted to know how I would capture him, the guy that they know so well, that's beloved to them, and their best friend. And it came time for the question where they said, well, Freddie, who would you say is your best friend? Who do you trust the most? And I couldn't remember what I said in that moment. And I felt them both turn at me. Who's he gonna say? And I answered as I'm watching, Mary's the person that I trust the most. And almost in unison, they took a beat and go, oh, man, that's all right. And I was like, oh, thank God. Yeah.
That's so stressful.
Tell me about it.
God.
Yeah, the whole thing was stressful.
Were they in it, and they were involved in and out throughout the development of the film, right?
Yeah, they had final say on everyone who got to play them. So after a point of that, it was all acceptance and kind of, listen, man, we know how hard this is going to be for all of you. Let's just lift you up. And they could not have been more kind and classy and dignified with the whole thing. I mean, I can imagine how bizarre it is to step on stage and have, older Bryan now talking to younger Freddie, who's staying in character and responding to him as Freddie sometimes Yeah, I mean, it's like the fucking Twilight Zone. At one point, Bryan's wife came on set, and she saw Gwillem as young Bryan, and her jaw just dropped, and she goes, "Oh my God, you look like Bryan when I met him." And it was very difficult, I think, for Bryan to deal with that.
When you
I could just do anecdotes all night long, by the way. 1957.
Yeah. Plenty of time for more. I'm curious about building this performance from the ground up, right? You go out and you find a movement coach.
Yeah.
What do you work on the movement coach with?
It's a good question, because it's the first time as an actor they're like, well, let's sit you down with some top choreographers. And I sat down with them, and in the moment, something wasn't gelling, something didn't feel right. And it was just that the work I had done, the archival footage that I had seen was him being spontaneous. Nothing was choreographed. In fact, he has a quote, he says, "If it's planned, then it's boring." Right? And so I thought, nothing can be planned. And in comes this young girl named Polly Bennett, who had a few credits on her resume, but not to the length of the other people that came in. But she spoke about movement and kind of developing his articulation, where that all stems from, and heritage of that, which I thought, yeah, it's kind of theatrical. I went to theater school, but I can get down with this. There was something about her that was so passionate. I could feel her drive. And I said, you know what? I hated when no one would take a chance on me, because I didn't have the requisites on my resume. This girl's got something. We connected. And I said, bang. I went to our line producer and I said, I think it's Polly Bennett. And he said, you sure? She's younger, but I happen to agree with you. I think that's the one. And then we went every day from then on to a place called Drama Works for 4 hours a day. And sometimes we would just watch him in an interview. We would watch how he smoked a cigarette. We would watch how his mom talked. We would watch Liza Minnelli because he loved her. We would watch Bob Fosse choreography. Then she'd get up and she'd say, hey, how about today you deliver a soliloquy of Killer Queen in the style of Marie Antoinette. And I was like, really? And sure enough, I went out there and I did my best Marie Antoinette version, and all of a sudden I found this and this and all of this. And I was like, oh, give me more.
And that's very different from how you've normally worked, right? And it's different from what another choreographer, I think, might have say concentrate on the stage persona more.
Yeah, well, we were building up to. We started the shooting with Live Aid. Day one, Hollywood. Who came up with that idea? No. I mean, for a second I thought they just want to see if we can sink or swim, and if this doesn't work on day one, they're going to fold it all up. And then I got the call sheet for day two, and that was like winning a fucking Oscar.
Yeah.
Here.
You must have been so exhausted on day two, though, after that.
Day two, I was exhausted, but I was exhilarated by it. She said, you're never going to get to Live Aid if we don't do these exercises. I mean, she'd drill me day in and day out. She'd have me skiing across a room. I said, we're skiing across a room? She said, remember Marie Antoinette? I said, we're skiing across a room. And, that's when you get that move.
Oh, right.
And it was little stuff like that we would do, that we got to doing Live Aid, and, a moment of Radio Gaga where something that we had done so much earlier plays into that. And I was like, oh, I see what you did here. And it was magical. We started on day one, we did Bohemian Rhapsody. Day two, Radio Gaga. Day three, we did the Deos and Hammer to Fall, so on and so forth. But I wasn't quite hitting everything the way I had done it with her in rehearsal. And I said, Polly, I know I can do this. I know I can do this. And it came time towards the end, and I said, I think we just need to run it all as one concert. And so I begged Graham King, our producer, I said, please, give me one more day. And you'll rarely hear this from a producer, but he acquiesced, and he put his own money up to say, here's your extra day. Don't fuck this up. And they put 3 camera cranes out, and we had an incredible DP named Tom Siegel. and 3 cranes, 3 cameras on the ground, thousands of extras, background actors, supporting actors, thankfully mostly Queen fans. And
Not hard to find.
No, not hard to find, not at all, especially there.
Yeah.
But we went for it, and I realized, oh, this is it. I was moving like I had moved in rehearsal, even with more energy. I was whipping around like I never had before. And you realize, oh, they're running on pure adrenaline. And that's what's taking the body in, allowing the body to do things that are normally just not human. And that's when I realized, this is an element of why he is supernatural on stage. He feeds off of everything. And so that's when I just had a little smile through it all, because that's when I realized the sync was matching to the original performance in some small way. And it's an adrenaline rush enough as an actor, but when you get out there and you see something that you've been watching over and over replicated by a designer, a production designer, as you've been staring at it countlessly, it's fucking mind-blowing.
Yeah.
Right, and then I had an incredible makeup artist named Jan Sewell. She did Eddie Redmayne in The Theory of Everything. So I said, yes, please, and thank you. And then Julian Day did the costumes and got it right all the way through. And it was just this collective experience where I never looked at myself and said, that's Freddie in one particular manner. I looked at what everyone had achieved and said, oh, we all made Freddie.
Yeah. What was most important to you to get right?
I don't know, man.
Yeah.
It's hard. I think when you look at it, it's Queen. They're going to live forever. They're going to outlast me on this stage in this moment of my life. They're going to outlast all of us. They've lasted for generations. They've broke every stereotype of what music was supposed to be. They defied every convention of what it was. They're a defiant breed, and they will live on forever. So I just thought, if you have an opportunity to bring this to possibly a new generation and share this, I think this idea of allowing yourself to be your most authentic self and sharing that with an audience to feel a little bit more liberated and free and accepting of their own individuality and be a little bit more inclusive of the world around us. I think that's a message that whether Freddie ever wanted to say it publicly, feels like that at the core was something I wanted to relay.
Yeah. And he's such an interesting figure because there wasn't a lot that he wanted to say publicly. When you talk about that interview where he's sort of deflecting and he's playful in the interviews and he's turning them into his own little performances, but he's not necessarily being sincere about his motives.
He's a coy bastard. Well, he's a revolutionary in the sense that I think we're all kind of striving to be a little bit of him now, where we don't want to be marginalized by what people think of us or about what we have to tell people about ourselves, or segregated into one point of view of who we are or what people want us to be. He oftentimes, when you ask him in interviews, he goes, "I'm just me, darling, just me." And I think that's such a gorgeous thing that for decades we're all aspiring to do. No labels, no boxes. He's fucking Freddie Mercury, and that's all that fucking matters.
And I wonder what challenge that presents, knowing that that's the way he felt, that he didn't want to give away his secrets, right? That he wanted to maintain the aura of being Freddie Mercury. It puts someone in the position of, I'm in this all the time as someone who writes about artists that I admire, right?
Yeah.
You respect the aura and you respect the mystery and you know there's a power to that, but then you also want to know what's going on right behind that facade. Was that a tension for you in this project?
Very much a tension and very an obstacle I did not quite know how to surmount, because, you look at him and you know, we watch all these Marvel movies, but the guy gets on stage in a crown and a cape, and he almost levitates in a way. You look at him, and I mean, we throw this term rock god out there, but he is, I mean, a deity. He's an icon.
These are our Facebook questions.
And so it's really hard to discover who's underneath all of that. And that was the thing I had to just kind of move away from and say, where's the humanity in this human being? And I thought, okay, what can you relate to? You go about it the way you do any other character. Okay, here's an immigrant kid, a kid who at a young age literally was put on a ship to go to school, you know, under the age of 5 into India without his parents. And he studied in a school, a British boarding school. Thankfully, he learned English. Came back to Zanzibar. There's a revolution going on there. He doesn't go to London until 18. And when you think about it, if he didn't have the British education, he probably would have been in London with a pretty deep accent, right? And maybe not have had the position to become who he was, another deficit. Thank God he had that. But he's still a fish out of water, majorly. His name's Farouk Bulsara, right? As a kid, he's called Bucky for most of his time at St. Peter's. Yeah. And then he's trying to discover his sexual identity in a time and place where the stigma of being anything other than heterosexual was kind of horrific. And there's this turmoil that's just brewing inside of him. And there's a point where it needs to explode, like a fireball, right? He is Mr. Fahrenheit because something is burning inside of him. And he gets to release it on stage and be exactly who he wants to be and share it with the world in a way that allows him to be almost superhuman, right? There's a freedom that exists there that just, it needs to find itself. Otherwise, it's going to go in a different place, and we're never going to have Freddie Mercury again, right? Not as we know it. Yeah. And I think there's that place where he gets to dispense all of who he wants to be and knows himself as, and has the freedom in front of thousands, and kind of looks at everybody when he's like the Mona Lisa, because he's out there, and you all feel like he has your attention, like he's looking straight at every single one of us. And he doesn't play to the front row. It's another thing Pauly says, he's always looking to the back, to the cheap seats, because those are his people.
Yeah. And I, as you're talking about his character, you're constantly weaving in quotes from his songs, right? Is that something that you realized when you took this part on, or did the songs begin to mean something different to you the more you got to know about him?
Another way, it was really difficult to get to that understanding of who he was for quite a long time, and I thought to myself, it took me a while, but I said, oh man, you've been staring right at it, it's been right under your nose. He almost left you a diary. If you look at all of his songs and put them together, and I did, I started writing out all his lyrics, and it was all there. I mean, everything was coming straight from his soul, straight from his heart. You look at it, he's a poet. The man is superhuman. He's a costume designer. He created the logo for Queen. He wrote the majority of everything in the beginning until he realized, oh, we can all do this together. But it was a diary, and he was pouring his heart out. He's got songs where he says, I am forever searching high and low. Why does everybody tell me no? Neptune of the seas, an answer for me, please. He says, find me somebody to love. Can anybody find me somebody to love? Right? He's just telling you what he's dying for. And that was so informative to me. Yeah.
And every production has its ups and downs, difficulties. This one, obviously, you've been asked a whole lot about. Bryan Singer leaving the production, Dexter Fletcher taking over. I still don't understand what went down, what caused Bryan to not be involved with the project any longer. Is there anything you can tell me to sort of explain what that dynamic was?
I don't ever want to take away from celebrating this human being, right? We can talk about a ton of different things, but what I will say is, it's the same reason we don't go into this kind of hedonistic, illicit, gratuitous point of view of what his life was like sometimes. The guy liked to have sex, he was very promiscuous. But if you kind of wallow in some of the darker moments, you don't really get to celebrate just who this human being was. You want to shine a light on it for a hot second in order to celebrate what this man has given us. We had a space and time where things were a bit tumultuous, and we got a guy named Dexter Fletcher who came on who knew the project very well. He was considered to direct it 4 years prior. So he came in, he's an actor, first and foremost. So we could talk in a way that he understood me. And he's an East London guy that came in with a fire like Freddie and injected us with such enthusiasm to finish this job. So bless his heart.
It must have been hard to finish. I mean,
at this point, I gotta say, I will say this. First season of Mr. Robot went through 7 different directors. When you know Elliot, a lot of directors can come in and tell me what to do, but I'm going to try to stick to what's working. Yeah. And it was working.
Yeah. I'll read some of these questions from Facebook. We got a little more time. What are
3 minutes and 43 seconds.
Man, we'll see what we can do.
By the way, there was a clock on the Live Aid set. I don't know if you saw it, but it was green, red, and yellow, and it gave you exactly 20 minutes for your set. And Queen was one of the only bands that actually rehearsed, and they thought, listen, let's truncate our songs and play the hits. While people were playing their new single or whatnot, they knew how to play to arenas. They knew how to play to that many thousands of people. And I talked to a lot of people who knew Freddie. One was this guy called Paul Gambaccini, and he did all the interviews backstage. He said, everybody was talking and loud, and it was a really fun environment backstage. Once Queen was about 3 minutes in, silence backstage, and everyone gravitated to the front. Yeah. And probably the most difficult moment in David Bowie's life when he had to follow that.
Yeah. I do feel bad for anybody who has to follow that. It's unbelievable.
When you feel bad for David Bowie,
that's
a problem. Somebody did all right.
We got Jessica from Facebook. Thank you, Jessica. Asks, what are your 3 roles you still want to play? Do you have a bucket list like that?
No, dude, I'm done.
Yeah, you're done. Going out like a fireball.
I'm going out like a fireball. Look, if I ask for any more than this, I think I'm just a prick.
What was your?
Thank you, Jessica.
Paula asks, what was your favorite song to recreate?
Oh man, that's tough. I do love Keep Yourself Alive because it was one of the songs that I did at Abbey Road. Yeah. And to bring it all kind of full circle was special. To have that moment of trying to figure out the half mic, it was fun. It was fun. Doing the young Freddie was really special. That was the time I got to meet Freddie's sister for the first time in that world, which was very bizarre and alien for her. She just finally watched the movie right before we screened it at Wembley Arena in front of 6,500 people, which was special. I gotta say, this was super cool. I walk into Wembley, sit down, and there's 65 people waiting to watch Bryan and Roger come in, and as we're waiting for the credits to roll, I just said, couldn't help it, I was so energized, I just went. And then everyone picked it. It was nuts. And Bryan had actually done the Fox Fanfare. He put about 20 guitars on it. So the crescendo was carrying over the stomp, stomp, clap. that was carrying over the Fox fanfare, and I could kind of see his head almost exploding, because at once it's like, I created this thing, but now I can't even hear what I've done for the Fox fanfare.
Last question will not come from Facebook. It'll come from a gentleman named Gus who emailed me. If you're here, Gus, thank you for your email you sent me earlier this week. Gus is a huge fan of Queen, and he told me that he was so happy that the band was finally getting a movie because he felt like they never got respect. He called them, in his mind, the Rodney Dangerfield of rock. That critics, in particular, people like me, have not written nice things about. You know, like songs like Bohemian Rhapsody weren't received well by critics at the moment. So if you were to kind of, do you see this film in some way, and did the band see this film in some way as a correction of that kind of critical?
Oh, man, they know they're rock gods.
Yeah, they know.
They know what's up. They got no problem. They just, I think this is a good little anecdote that Bryan just wrote me. He was going with Anita Dobson, his wife, who's fallen in love with the young Gwillem in the movie. They were going to a wedding, and he saw a bus go by with the image of the film on it, which is my Freddie face, and it decorated the entire double-decker red bus. And he wrote me, he goes, man, it was on the same line, the number 9 bus that Freddie and I used to take to talk to our agents as we sat atop of it and wonder how we were going to approach them as to why our record career just wasn't working out. And he said Freddie would be so tickled to think that now there would be a movie with his face on it, plastered on the side of a bus.
That's fantastic.
Let's end there.
Thank you all. Really appreciate you for coming tonight.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you all.